Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's main event featuring brother versus brother. In the red corner, from Indianapolis, Indiana, an ER doctor, a Christian, a Republican, Dr. David Blank. And in the blue corner, hailing from San Francisco, California, a computer scientist, an atheist, a Democrat, Dr. Doug Blank. Now it's time for the Blanks to rumble!
Today is October 8th, 2020, and David and I, Doug, are going to discuss election 2020.
Hey, brother.
Hello, what's up?
Today we're talking about the upcoming election, which will be here in less than a month, in a few short weeks. And then we won't have to listen to any more debates or what was panned off as a debate. But moving forward, what are your takes on the upcoming election, or not talking about who's going to win or who's going to lose, but just predictions on how it's going to work in the age of COVID?
Yeah, well, not just the age of COVID, which is a big part of it, but it's also the age of Trump, who has been actively sowing chaos about mail-in voting. So at the one point in time where probably we want, or more people would like, to be able to mail-in vote, the President of the United States has really gone on attack of this idea. And I don't think it's just a random thing that he cares so much about the security of voting. I don't think that's it at all, because there's no evidence there's any mass fraud in voting, or mail-in voting, or absentee ballots, or even in-person voting. But there's a statistic, and I think we can put this up on the screen right now, showing the differences between preferences voting by party. So you see that we have almost 50% of the Republicans favor in-person voting, and almost exactly the same amount of Democrats prefer vote by mail. So this has set up a situation where if you don't count the mail-in votes, I think one candidate is going to win. And if you count all of the votes, it sure looks by polls right now that a different candidate is going to win. So,
yeah. So why do you think it just puzzles me why voting by mail versus voting in person would fall out along some type of party lines? And I'm forgetting now exactly when that graph was put together, but what do you think are the reasons for that?
Well, I think there are 2 points to your question. The graph actually came from the middle of May, so fairly late into this year and into the COVID, and a little bit late into the campaigning. So, but I suspect, and I don't know this for a fact, but even before this, that there were probably some biases that leaned one direction or the other. And I think that's largely because Democrats have been taking the pandemic pretty seriously. I know, at least here in San Francisco, which has it has the best record for any of the large cities in the United States, but things have been pretty, serious. Everybody around wears a mask, whether they're inside or out. Things were closed down for a while. They're open back up in a restricted manner, but people really have taken that seriously. And of course, San Francisco and much of California is leans very Democratic. So I think there was already a preponderance of people on the Democratic side that are just really taking the pandemic seriously. Uh, and then when you start adding what Trump has said, not by accident, I think he really knew about this chart early on. And I think that it was a particular strategy to drive a wedge between that and try to get as many people as he can to vote on election day so that there'll be a lot of votes that perhaps might not be counted or that he could sow suspicion on. I
The
would.
clock is tolling, if you can hear it.
Oh, don't you
Yeah,
both
well,
see that?
with that graph coming out kind of at the height of the coronavirus, that may help to explain a little bit of that shift in, or at least the party affiliation with the voting, because whether or not you have a shutdown or whether or not you get your economy open back up again was also something that fell along party lines where Democrats favored shutdowns and more Republican districts favored opening businesses back up and getting out. So it may just be the outlook for people heading towards November is that if you live in a locality that's shut down, it's like, well, yeah, I'm not going out to vote if I'm not going out to the grocery store and I'm not
Exactly.
going out to do anything else.
Right.
Whereas if you live in an area where it's like, well, yeah, the hair salons are all open back up again and I can pretty much do whatever I want as long as I wear a mask. Sure, I'm going to go vote just like I always do. So that may help to explain a little bit about why that graph shows such a disparity. So one of the things that you brought up, and we've actually talked before off camera, was a little bit about the Postal Service. And one thing I found really interesting is on this date when we're recording, there are places that are already opened for voting in person, not just by mail, but in person. And I saw a couple of reports the other day, and the majority of people that were there voting in person were Democrats.
Yeah.
And I thought, after we had just looked at this graph and we'd been kind of accumulating some information, I found it a little bit curious that the people who were actually going to the polls and voting in person were Democrats. And I didn't see where those reports were at. They may have been in a place that has a much, much larger Democratic population. But all, just going down the line and talking to people, it appeared that overwhelmingly the majority of them were Democrats.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't see any contradiction with anything that we've talked about because I think, like myself, I was sort of shocked to see that disparity along political lines. So when I saw that, it just like clicked into my head, and I think a lot of people have realized this. Oh, this is really what is driving, perhaps, and we don't know what goes on in Trump's head, but it seems to make a lot of sense, that if you can sow doubt about mail-in voting, and a lot of that mail-in voting is, first of all, going to come from Democrats, and secondly, might not be tallied on election night, or maybe not even the next day or two after November 3rd, that gives him an entryway into, on election night, you're going to see, I wouldn't be surprised. Now, given what you've said about a lot of Democrats voting in person early, that this could change things. And I think that's why there's so many Democrats voting early in person. They sort of figured this out, and they do not want that tally on election night to be so large that Trump is just going to say, okay, I won. We don't need to count anymore. and declare victory. And he's already cast doubt that he would leave the White House easily. He says things like, "Well, I'll have to see if I don't believe it's a fair election." And I think the thing that he's targeted is on election night. If he's in the lead, he's going to declare himself a winner.
He may just declare himself a winner even if he's not in the lead. I think that's part of his personality. But it may, I kind of look at it as less of a conspiracy, and it's more, I think, so this is, I think, something that also is a Republican concern in general, is not absentee ballots, but if you just mail out a whole bunch of blanket ballots to everybody who's a registered voter or who has ever voted in the past, and you don't even know if they still live at the same address or anything else. But if you have ballots that are not assigned to anybody and they're just random and they're put in the mail and sent out, that opens the door to problems if somebody were to get those. Now, coming back to your thought,
that works that way.
Yeah. So before you get too offended at that, or if that upsets your sensibilities, the states that have actually been doing that are all, there's, I think, 8 of them, but in general, those are all states that are very, very unlikely to turn out to be contested. So I think that the concern is probably unfounded at this point, even at that. Now, one locality that was going to do that was Houston, and a federal judge just ruled yesterday that they can't do that. If you want a ballot, if you want to vote early, you have to obtain an absentee ballot through the normal process. They can't just mail out 1 million ballots to voters that haven't requested them. And again, coming back to one of your points, I think this is very unlikely going to be, I don't think we're going to have a clear winner on election night or the day after or the day after that or the day after that. There are already, I believe, a couple of hundred lawsuits about the rules of the elections that are across a lot of different states. And there are judges that are ruling in different ways as to when you have to count them, when you don't have to count them, when the postmarks have to be there. And I think that partly because of, well, largely because of COVID and the increased volume, people are trying to change the rules on the fly to handle their perceived or potential problems. But I think that changing the rules on the fly is actually going to make things much, much worse.
Well, I don't think we have to look too far for people trying to make things worse. I think part of the strategy from the Trump administration is to try to make it as bad and confusing and as chaotic as possible. I think, well, the polls look pretty bad for Trump. Here we are, this is what, October 8th? Things look pretty bad. Now, we've been here before. We were blogging 4 years ago when this election, and I think you and I, like most of the people in the United States, including probably Trump himself, expected that Trump was not going to win. But we know that that didn't happen. It was only like 100,000 votes spread across 3 states. So it was really, really close in terms of electoral college votes. But it was, it was overwhelming if you looked at the total number of votes. But of course, that's not how we decide a president. We go with the electoral college.
Yeah.
But actually, this looks very different this year. It looks very different than 2016. but I don't know of uh, uh, any Democrat that's counting their chickens. I mean, everybody is like, we're going the legislature in that state, then that could be bad news for the Democrats. So there's a lot of complications that go in, and I just hope that we don't get there. What I hope for, and people are calling this the blue shift that is going to start on election night, uh, we're going to be prepared for Trump to be in the lead. And then as those mail in ballots get counted, don't be surprised if Biden gains and gains and gains, passes, and then ends up winning the election. And I hope at that point that there's not so much chaos that we end up in court cases. I hope that things can be as clean and clear as we can possibly make them. But like you say, um, this is not controlled. Every state can do whatever they want. They can be as chaotic. They can close up as many polling places on election night as they want. Um, and then there's the Electoral College on that. So, um, crossing my fingers that we don't get into court battles.
Too late. we're
Oh,
we're already into all kind of court battles, and that so the problem is I think less of all of those things that you're talking about. I think the big problem is what's already on paper. In a lot of states, and a lot of the states that are actually battleground states, they have laws on the books right now that they probably should have changed about 6 months ago and failed. And now I'm not sure they should mess with it.
oh yeah.
But there are some states where, so if everybody is mailing in, if everybody votes at their site, most of their votes are just tallied as you vote. Whether you do it on paper or do it on a screen, you plug it in and it records your vote right then. So when the polls close, you know what the tally is, and you don't have to have somebody, yeah. But if everybody mails in their votes, the most time-consuming thing is opening envelopes. And so there are some states, about 6 of them, where you can't open the envelopes until election day. And if you've got 1.5 million votes that are in envelopes, that's a monumental task, just opening their envelopes. And you have to keep the envelope with them because you've got a postmark. And if it's missing its postmark, it may not count. If the postmark is late, it may not count. There's a host of different rules as to when you can start counting, when you can verify the signatures. There are some states that have a whole host of different rules. If the signature doesn't match, is the person able to come in and verify it or not? And what's their deadline for doing that? If they forget to sign it, can you contact that person and have them come in and verify that's their ballot or not? Or does it just go in the trash as an unsigned ballot?
Yeah.
So this year, especially, there are a huge number of first-time absentee ballot voters. And so there are certain rules as to how you fill out your ballot and, how it's mailed, how you sign it. It's not complicated in most cases, but it is something new. And not all the forms are user-friendly, so to speak. And so there are going to be a host of problems. I don't think there's going to be any hanging chads this time around.
I think
But
it'll be the equivalent.
yes, I think that there's going to be problems that are going to show up. And I think that there's a potential that they may be widespread. And I don't know that, I think that all these states are doing their best to work within the framework. But as long as the law is the law, There's some states where you can't start counting those ballots until noon on election day.
Yeah,
So
we'll give
yeah,
a
if you've got
to
one and
that.
a half million ballots,
We'll give a
yeah.
link to
So
that.
yeah, we've actually got a whole,
Yeah, so it's broken into two steps. There's processing, and then there's the counting. And like
yeah,
you say, for a lot of states, uh, I mean, you can understand that they want to have control. And so if you start counting a month out and you're not sure where those ballots are, and you're not doing it in a a controlled area, that would open itself up to manipulation. But there there has to be a better way. And of course, those laws didn't take into account that there could be millions and millions, tens of millions of people wanting to vote during a pandemic. So yeah, this is going to be I think, a frustrating election season. But I hope that people will remain calm, not demand that a winner be announced on November 3rd or 4th, but we look at things and try to remain fair and really try to look at things and just use common sense with this, and hopefully that it doesn't end up in the courts, it doesn't end up in Congress. We really want to keep it as partisan free as we can.
yeah. And I think that's our point of agreement, and the take home message is this is not gonna, that it's not gonna be done on election night. It's not gonna be done on election day. The rules of a whole bunch of states likely will preclude that, because some of them can count those ballots up until late in October. And
Yeah.
so and that's just by statute. That's not some trickery. It's not somebody
Yeah.
trying to pull the wool. It's the law of the state that as long as it's put in by election day, as long as it's got a postmark, there is a timetable that those votes can still be counted. And so there's going to be a trickle. It might not even be a trickle. It may just take them that long
Yeah.
to get through a giant stack of all these mail-in ballots, which is just the way it is. So people need to, as Doug says, people need to stay calm and just relax. It's going to be election week instead of election day. We hope it's not going to be election month, but I think we can both guarantee that this is going to take more time than it ever has before.
I surprised, but we agree.
Yep. See, we can do it. I don't know if we actually agreed on anything specific other than it's going to take a long time to do it, but that's a start.
Yeah, well, the rubber's going to meet the road when these court cases start, showing up, and one party or another tries to disenfranchise a large number of people, and I just hope that doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, I will say that I agree with you that the opportunity for shenanigans prior to the vote, in other words, just false balloting or trying that, I think is very, very low to almost negligible.
Yeah.
I think it is safe to vote by mail. And I think that anybody who wants to do it can do it. I don't think there's any problem with that.
David.
But there are going to be, no, there's going to be a lot of shenanigans as to what ballots get tossed and what ballots don't. And I don't think that's necessarily a one party deal. It's whatever it's going to take to win that state is what's going to happen. And if there's going to be one side wanting to count votes late, there's going to be other people that are going to want to toss them out if they don't meet a statutory deadline. And it's going to end up in the courts to say who's right and who's wrong in that. You want every vote to count, but at the same time, all the votes have to be done in a certain way to be legal. And that's where, like you say, the rubber hits the road, is how the courts are going to nuance that, or how they're going to thread that needle.
Well, and of course that people can do things to try to manipulate the system. So let's say that you have to have the ballots counted by a certain date, and you're counting 1, 2. Oh, let me look at that 1 again. Then that's not fair. And
Since we're getting close to Halloween, that just reminded me of the count. 1 ballot, 2 ballots.
okay, on that note, I think this is a good place to stop.
Yep. So until next time, this is
All right.
Blank versus Blank.
See you later.
Talk to you later. Adios.